Oh, you're gonna be in the picture too?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, do you not want me?
No, that's fine.
'Cause
Okay.
What's up, guys? We have Frank Andrews here today. This is my grandpa.
Oh God. All right.
I'm about to give him a heart attack before we even start.
I know.
So my grandpa is a famous medium and psychic in Soho.
You know, that's funny you'd say Soho because when I first moved over here, it was called Little Italy.
Literally.
Okay, then somebody got the bright idea because we're south of Houston, they used the term Soho.
Oh.
And then after a while, somebody got the bright idea from the corner of Houston Street to Spring Street over to the Bowery and Lafayette. They call it Nolita, north of Little Italy, Nolita. So my area has changed 3 times.
What do you prefer?
I call it Nolita.
Nolita?
Sometimes I say Little Italy. You know, I never think of it as Soho. Soho, I always think of further west.
How long have you lived here?
57 years. I think 57 years now. So I saw all the changes. When I first got down here, there was no one on the street.
Mm-hmm.
No one. When I got out of the subway, I was the only one on the subway who would get off at Prince Street. And I look around, nobody. There were no police officers anywhere. It was a very safe neighborhood because it was controlled by the mob.
Okay.
Because they lived down here, a lot of mobsters at that time. And there were a lot of junkies and derelicts. And when I had to leave in the morning, I had to step over them because they'd be laying in front of the house and they'd be so strung out that they didn't even know anybody was there. Yeah, that's how it was in the beginning. And then when Giuliani took over, he picked them all up, don't laugh, but he shipped them to Buffalo. He did, he put them on a bus to Buffalo. I know, ironic, you're living in Buffalo.
So my grandpa is from Buffalo, and
I'm from there originally, yeah.
And then I ended up going to Buffalo for school and ended up staying there. How funny is that, right? He came here and I left.
I know, I ran away when I was 18. I had to get out.
How was it when you first came here?
It was wonderful because it was very safe,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there wasn't the hatred that there's all over the country now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had black friends, I had Chinese friends. It was never a problem, but now, you know, you got to be careful what you say. You can't joke because people take it so serious, and next thing you know, you got a problem. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, you're very isolated in a way.
Mm. So how did you get into the psychic business?
Well, first it started when I was about 8 years old or 9 years old, something like that. Might have even been 10. But I was very young, I remember, and in Buffalo, I had my own bedroom, and the room got very, very hot. It was almost as if the air conditioner was sending out hot air rather than cold air. Now, whenever there's a ghost or spirit, whatever you want to call it, it's always cold. But this was not. This was really hot. And I sat up in bed, and there at the foot of the bed was this woman. And I knew who it was, and as far as I knew, she was very much alive. And not somebody that I knew in a sense that we were friends. She was much older, and she was the sister-in-law to one of my mother's sisters. So, yeah. So she was a distant relative.
Okay.
And I only saw her a few times. Very sweet, very charming, didn't smoke cigarettes. I'm sure she was a virgin. And I don't even think she drank a glass of wine.
Okay.
So anyway, she was at the foot of my bed and floating a little bit, like moving slowly. And I said to her, I said, "My God, you look so beautiful."
Mm-hmm.
And she smiled. And I said, "Why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you come see me?" And she said, "I came to say goodbye." And with that, like Walt Disney, thousands of little sparks just exploded, and it all came down. And then she was gone. in the morning, I went into the kitchen to have breakfast, and my sisters were there, and they were younger than I, and I didn't know what to do, or I wanted to say something, but I wasn't sure what to say about what happened the night before. And my mother, the phone rang, and in those days, we had what they call a party line. There were 3 other people that could be on that phone.
Okay.
Yeah, and you could hear them talking, so you'd hang up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and eventually, when they got off, I would make a phone call. So anyway, the phone rang, and my mother went in the other room. There was certainly nothing like cell phones, and
Yeah.
there wasn't a phone in every room. That's not unheard of back then. And these phones were so old and so heavy. I'll never forget that. So she came back, and she looked at me, and she had this look on her face, and she said, "Guess who died last night?" And I said, "Grace." And she said, "How do you know?" And I said, I know, I saw her. She was in my bedroom last night. And my mother said, "Oh, you saw a ghost. Don't tell everyone because they'll think you're crazy."
Yeah.
And that was the beginning. That was the first thing that happened.
Okay.
And then the second thing that happened that I can remember was that I was standing next to my mother, and there were 3 women that were sisters. There were neighbors from across the street. And while we were talking, they were talking, this man came up who lived across the street on their side of the street, and he said, "Hello ladies," and "Hi Frankie," and he put his hand on my head. And I kept looking at him, and he was a worker. He had a tool belt with all kinds of tools, and he was a trucker and what have you. And so they talked for a few minutes, and he walked away, and as I watched him, it was as though he was fading. It looked like he was going into a gray kind of cloud.
Uh-huh.
And so without thinking, I just said, "Oh, he's going to die soon." And of course, one woman, one of the sisters, she was the more tough one.
Uh-huh.
She would say, "You shouldn't say things like that." And then the other sister said, "What makes you think that or say that?" And I said, "Well, look at him. He's fading. He's not gonna live long. He's just disappearing right in front of you." They didn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
And so after, my mother told me, if you ever see anything strange, don't say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me, because people can't handle that.
Yeah.
And about, I don't know if it was a week or a few days later, because I was, again, so little, but I know it was short time later, his truck went into a wall. Now, I don't know, he could have committed suicide, he could have been drunk, or he could have had a heart attack. But, in those days, they weren't going to do an autopsy on him, and he had no family. He was a loner, a blue-collar worker, and so they figured out it doesn't matter. And so we never knew why, but he died in his truck. So that was the second thing. And so, but I didn't take much notice. This is something I thought of the other day, which I haven't told, I don't think, people, but one of the things was, I remember in Buffalo you had to shovel snow in order to go to school. You had to make a pathway. And I slipped and fell, and I hit the back of my head.
Oh no.
And I saw like thousands of stars, like little twinkling lights. But I mean, maybe a million. The whole thing, it was black, but I kept seeing those. And I picked myself up, and I laid there, I don't know, for quite a while. And I made an igloo in my backyard. Yeah, yeah, I did. I was a loner, and I didn't have friends, really. They knew me, I knew them, but they were into baseball, and I wasn't. They were into whatever, and most of them, they were into baseball, it seemed. And so I made an igloo, and I would shut it off, and I'd go in there and I'd fall asleep, or I would just look up, and when the sunlight hit the top of the igloo, it had all these, because of the snow,
Oh, yeah?
all these little sparks, and it reminded me of what had happened.
Okay.
And then these little creatures in my mind would come in and talk to me. And it was probably, you know, like how kids play games. Were they real, or were they just my figment? By the way, when you get old, it's hard to remember words, or hard to say words. And so what happened was these little creatures could have been just my imagination, or they could have been real, I don't know. But that brought me a lot of comfort. And then many years later, I remembered, years before this incident when I fell, I had gone into the hospital to have my tonsils removed.
Okay.
I think I was like 5, maybe 6. And when they put the mask on me, because I don't remember much, I remember going into the building. I remember being in a bed with bars, like, you know, probably like a crib, and they put this thing on my face. I remember this hand and a mask coming on my nose, and I saw those same little stars, the ether, I guess it was, knocked me out. See? And so it was the same effect that I saw when I fell. So maybe there's some kind of correlation between the two. I don't know. But anyway, so that was the beginning. And I was very depressed at one time as a kid, like so many, like even today, even more so. And I didn't really want to live. I didn't want to do anything. And my mother saw that, and she was afraid I was going to commit suicide. So she suggested that I listen to opera. And I thought, oh, no, no, no. And she said, no, no, you might like it. So I went to a library, and when I got there, it was a very odd place. Nobody much went there. I think it was always empty. I think it was called Grosvenor's Library. Anyway, I went there, and I told the woman, I said, I'm interested in, my mother wants me to get interested in opera. And the lady was very funny, and she said, well, she said, what I think you should do is start with something light, like La Bohème by Puccini. She said, stay away from Wagner. She said, you'll jump off a roof. Wagner is wonderful, but you really have to be older, and you have to have gone through all the Italian, all the French operas, okay, and then listen to Wagner. So what happened was she gave me a book, and it had the libretto, and it had the musical notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I could follow the musical notes, and I could follow the words, and as I was doing this, I could see, you know, right in front of me all of this colors, and the notes were dancing in front of my face, and the whole room, and it was really an amazing experience. When I took out the album Aida by Verdi, Giuseppe Verdi, it was about Egypt, and I got very, very into Egypt then, and I began looking up hieroglyphics, but like most kids who get excited about Egypt, after a while they forget about it, and you know, so it was more like a Walt Disney fantasy for me, the hieroglyphics and some drawings that I found the other day, actually. I still had them. Anyway, so that was that, and then I met a group of people who got me involved in the theater. First, again, I was very much into puppets, and I used to put on puppet shows in our basement, and we charged 5 cents. And I remember one woman said to my mother, and I was standing there, and she said, wow, your kid is making a lot of money, and that was fine. If there were 10 kids, how much is that times 5? You know? And so my mother said, listen, it's the cheapest babysitter you're ever going to have. Because all the kids were there screaming and yelling, and we built a little theater. And it was interesting because when I left home, I took a pair of scissors and I cut all the strings off so maybe that was symbolic in a way. so I did puppet shows, and my sisters helped me in the shows, and they were the different voices, and we did Alice in Wonderland, we did Peter Pan, we did a movie we saw about Simon where he said he could fly. It was a Hollywood movie, but of course he couldn't fly, and he falls off the tower and goes down and dies.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we did that, and so we had a lot of fun. And then the puppets kind of, I guess, went into the box, you might say. And I started getting involved with theater people, and I started going to acting school, and it was fascinating to watch others. I don't think I was really very good at it, although I did get a very good review on one show that I was in, and they said I was the best.
Ooh.
Which, playing an Italian boy. It was called The Time of the Cuckoo, and the movie was called Summertime, I think it was, with Katharine Hepburn, and I was in, of course not on Broadway, but this was in local community theater. Anyway, I did that for a while, and I loved these people because they were very intellectual, and they're not talking about baseball and cars.
Oh.
No, they were talking about life, and it was so exciting, and they turned me on to incredible music. I fell in love with Lottie Lenya and Kurt Weill, German composer and singer. She was a singer, and it was a whole other world. And they took me to a coffee shop.
Ooh.
And in those days we didn't have Starbucks, so the word cappuccino was like, what's that? That word didn't even exist.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it did in New York. It certainly didn't in Buffalo.
Oh yeah.
And so when you would go in there, these those days they called them, I think, beatniks. Okay. And somebody would say poems, and somebody would sing. It was never really that good, but it was fascinating to be there, and it was lit up. They had these baskets that were on the attached to the wine bottles, and when the wine bottle was empty, they would put a candle, and all of the wax would drip down, and it was really like a Hollywood movie. And so I found what was it? Viennese coffee. Ooh. Which had whipped cream, and it had a little bit of I think nutmeg on it. Okay. And so that was my favorite. And I was just a kid, and here I am at this point. I was probably 14 years old, hanging out with these intellectual people who were talking about huge productions of theater and Shakespeare and Oedipus Rex and things that nobody else would talk about except them. And so I got into a few plays, small parts, which I just loved it. I loved the whole ambiance, the whole feeling of it. And then another coffee shop opened up on the corner, but a little bit bigger and not quite as intimate. And I would go there, and the owner and his girlfriend, Bob, his name was Robert, took a liking to me right away. They thought, wow, this kid, so smart. So I guess I was just repeating what I learned at the other coffee shop. And so we became very close friends. And she looks at me and she says, what do you want to do with your life? Well, let's backtrack again. One of the people that I met who was in the theater group was Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett became Mr. Broadway. He did Chorus Line. He did, what's the other thing he did? Dream Girls. He was a choreographer. He was also a director. Anyway, so Michael and I became friends because we went to the same high school. Okay. And he got me to take dance classes from Miss Ferrara, Norma Ferrara. I'll never forget it, on Grand Island. and I wasn't really very good. I mean, because I'm going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I'm counting, and they could see me count as I'm
doing your best,
trying to remember the steps. But I was fascinated when they took me to the theater, and I saw Marcel Marceau, who was a pantomimist, where he did all these wonderful things, and I thought, oh, I like that. So one day, we were having a special guest come to the studio on Grand Island, and it was George Balanchine.
Okay.
You know, that's like God in the ballet world at the time. Oh yeah, and they still do his pieces. He's long gone.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was looking for students to bring to New York, and so I was put in the back where they couldn't find me or see me. I was terrible. And so he was sitting there looking, and then when it was over, he was only there about an hour, and which is surprising. A man like that would come to Grand Island because, you know, I mean, here's world renowned, you know, but he's looking for new talent.
Yeah.
And as everybody's walking away and they're all so happy because he's there, I was sort of hiding, and he went, "You, come here."
He noticed you.
Oh,
no.
God, you're gonna yell at me. And he goes, "No dance." No. I know. And so I didn't move over his front, and he says, mime, pantomime. And I thought, whoa, that's what I had been thinking. I was better at that, you know, pretend than dance. And so, getting back to the second coffee shop, I don't even remember the name, what they called it, but Bob and his girlfriend said to me, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I'd like to do a pantomime show." And she said, "Do it."
Okay.
And just put it on here. I said, "Really?" And I said, "Okay." So she was very clever. I said, "You have to give me a few weeks to prepare it." Whatever. So I thought about it, and I did the lion, where I put my head in a lion's mouth and walked the tightrope, and I did all these kind of wonderful circus things. And what they had was a lot of tables and chairs, and the place only held 40 people, and I think about 80 showed up. They had to get a police officer to man the crowd. Well, there was nothing going on in Buffalo, and they had advertised it in the paper that I was going to be there. And so I wore black and white, I have photo pictures, you can see them, black and white striped shirt, black tights, did white face, and maybe I think I had a tear coming down of one eye, and a hat, just very similar to Marcel Marceau. Anyway, and I would perform down the middle aisle, and it was a huge hit. So I began doing shows on Friday night, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday.
Okay.
And it was great, and people were buying me coffee. And one day I said to Bob, I said, "I'm not sleeping anymore." He said, "You're drinking too much coffee."
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, from now on, just give me water." So they were paying for a cup of coffee for me, but he was just giving me water. I couldn't. Because, I mean, that much caffeine, and you know, and I'm a kid. I was like up for days. You know? Yeah. So, but the shows were great, and it was a wonderful outlet for doing them, and it was fun because it was very intimate, and it wasn't a theater. It was, you know, something that nobody had ever seen in Buffalo. You know, and I enjoyed it, and then I began, with the money I was making, I began buying record albums and hundreds of operas, and that became my whole world until I finally moved to New York City.
Ooh, and that's where it all started.
Well, what happened basically was the police came into my parents owned a restaurant, and a lot of policemen ate there. Blue collar. It was a blue collar restaurant where workers from the neighborhood. Dinner was 55 cents. If you wanted extra veggies, he charged my dad 10 cents. It was 10 cents for coffee, 5 cents for refill. It was really, really amazing. I mean, it was so cheap. And he was open like 6 days and a half a week.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, he thought if he wasn't open, they would go to another restaurant and wouldn't come back. See, so he had that mentality.
Okay.
And hardly ever saw him when I was growing up. And there's this incident where at Thanksgiving he was sitting at one end of the table and everybody's around and I said to my mother, "Who's that man at the end of the table?" And she said, "That's your father." Well, the reason was, see, he would get up and be out of the house by 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock by the time he got to the restaurant. And he even at one point gave keys to the truckers because they would get there before him. So they turned on the coffee, and he would come in and there'd be money in the cash register. Well, it was very friendly kind of, and it was so cheap. So anyway, then he decided she said, "Look, you work too much, you gotta stop." So he took Saturdays off.
Oh, okay.
And then we would go to the zoo, then the following Saturday we would go to maybe the movies, and then the following Saturday we would go to the museum. And then it was the zoo, the museum, the movie, and that was it.
Yeah.
But that was okay. Those were fun days. So the policeman, one of them, walked up to my mother and said, "Listen, we're arresting all the queers in Buffalo."
Oh no.
Oh yes, they went on a she's gonna eat the tinsel out.
Ashley, come here.
Tinsel. Yeah, I better say she got it all over her head.
It's so
Because that's not good for her.
Oh, she won't eat it.
That will go into her intestines. So he said, "We've been arresting a lot of them, putting them in jail for no reason other than the fact that they were gay."
Yeah.
And by the way, that word "gay" was never used then. And so then he said, "We take their address book." Those everybody.
Address book,
Yeah, not on there was no such thing as
cell phone.
So he said, "Your son's name came up in the book."
Oh no.
And so she said, "Well, he's in the theater group, and that's probably where they are." And he says, "Well, you tell them to stay away from them because we may have to arrest him too." Not knowing if I was gay or straight or whatever, is guilty by association.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was around 18, 19, and I said to myself, "I gotta go. This is the end of Buffalo."
Oh.
So I packed up my bag, and when I finished high school, I left and went here to New York. I would go back from time to time if they called me and said, "Listen, we have a small part in the play. Would you mind doing it, or would you be the stage manager?" And there was no money involved. It was all volunteer, but it was fun. It was a hell of a lot of fun, and it was interesting to watch the actors on stage because it made them feel important.
Yeah.
You see, and then I think that's when I first met Michael Bennett. Was it there? No. I met him at the high school I went to, and he's the one who encouraged me to go to the theater school and to take dance classes, and that's how I got involved in all that. My advice is if you put all of this at one time on, let's say if you're going to do something like YouTube, they won't won't watch it. So you have to put parts of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like part 1, part 2, part
Yeah.
3. You have to divide it.
Okay.
Because the people, I mean, TikTok is what, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway. So so now let's say I moved to New York, and this is how it all began. I stayed at the YMCA. My father said, stay at the Y, and then get the New York Times and look at the newspaper, want ads, and try to find a job. So I did exactly what he said, and the job opportunities were amazing. And it said museum, and I thought, well, that sounds like it could be fun.
Yeah.
You know, so I called them up, and they sent me out, and I went for the interview, and I had only about $50 in my pocket.
Yeah.
Because most of the money, any money I made, I bought record albums. I know. Well, that was life then. Forget it now. So anyway, I went there, and this very nice short man started talking to me, and he really took a liking to me. And I remember him saying, I'll never forget these words, he said, look, I don't know what you're going to be in life, he said, but I know you're going to be a success. He said, you've got it in you, I see that. And I remember a mobster once said that to me too. He said, you know what I like about you? He said, you took a shot and you won. Yeah. So anyway, so I started working at the Museum of Natural History.
Ooh, okay.
And I was behind a counter, and the counter was so high up, so I got a box and I stood on the box, so I was up higher than the counter. And what I had to do was rent out radio guides, and they were about a box. It was about this big, quite heavy, with a huge strap around you put around your neck, and you would have earplugs, and you would go to a window, and it'd say 101. So you turned the dial to 101, and they worked, they didn't work.
Yeah.
This was the early. Now it's very sophisticated, and you know they have this one thing you hold, and it's awesome. You know. So anyway, I was renting them, and nobody wanted to rent them because this was something new at the museum. So I said, all right, folks, step right up, and not only will you see the museum, now you can hear the museum. And of course, people were crowding around, and I'm renting off like, it was 50 cents. 50 cents for the rental.
Yeah.
So I was moving them so in and out so fast, you have no idea. And they'd come back and say, oh, it didn't really work. And I said, well, I'll give you another one. No, we gotta go. And I said, you want your money back? I said, it's only 50 cents. You know, the museum is always in need of money. I didn't know anything. My first day at work there, I said, why don't you just donate the 50 cents to the museum? Oh, all right. And they would leave.
Okay.
So I took the money and I put it in the safe and, you know, closed it. And the next day when I went to work, my boss looked at me and he said, Frank, the money, and I freaked. I thought, oh my God, I didn't close it right. Somebody stole it. And I said, I put it in the safe. He said, yeah, no, it was there. He said, how come there's so much? I said, why? He said, you know, if we make $100, we're lucky. He said, we very rarely, he said, we make maybe $50. He said, you brought $1,200. And he says, we've never seen anything. What did you do? And I said, maybe you don't want to know. So I didn't really read novels, but at that time everybody was talking about a novel called Catcher on the Rye.
Oh, I read that book. I actually read it.
Yeah. So I had a little paperback book, and I'm reading it, and it talks about him going to the Museum of Natural History and the canoe with the Indians standing in the canoe, the Native Americans, And I looked over, and there it was, the canoe right in front of me, because I was at that the 77th Street, I think, entrance. It's been so long now. And there they were, the canoe. And as I was reading, it talked about the smell of the cleaning fluid. They're still using the same one back then. About walking down the hall with the big totem poles. And it was so funny to read that and to be there at that moment.
Yeah.
You know? And so what happened was, after about a few weeks, this woman came over, heavy-set woman with a cane, and, not a cane, what do you call that? Isn't that funny? I forget words.
Don't worry.
Let's say a walking stick.
Yeah.
We'll say that.
A walker.
Okay. And so she came over and she said to me, "You're the talk of the museum." I said, "Oh God." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "I want to have lunch with you." I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "I love this walking stick." And she said she had fallen when she was in Africa, and a chief gave it to her. And I said, "Wow, that's very interesting." So anyway, she said, "Today, come over to the lunch room." I said, "Okay." And we all had, the people who worked, I was the lowest of the low, so I think, it's been so long, I don't remember, but I think the coat that I used to wear that they give you was a light brown, I'm going to say, but I could be wrong. And some were green, some were blue, I think, and some were white. I think the scientists all wore white.
Mm-hmm.
So we were low man on the totem pole. So if you had a brown coat, you don't sit with those who have a blue coat, and if those who have a blue coat, you don't sit with those who have a white coat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were segregated. So I went up to the lunch, and my group, you know, that worked in the what would you call it? Souvenir department. You know, they sell things.
Souvenirs.
Yeah, sell stuff. You know, for the museum to make money. They
Yeah.
sell things.
The gift shop.
Gift shop. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, and so, but I was outside the gift shop at the desk.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked over. She kept calling me, so I walked over, and she introduced me to all these scientists, and I listened. And my boss was having a heart attack as I got up and walked. You know, I mean, I invaded the white coats' territory.
Yeah.
I thought I was committing crime or something. So anyway, after lunch was over and I went back to my station, he came over to me and said, "You know, you don't do that." I said, "Well, but she invited me." He said, "Well, you know who that is." I said, "She's a nice lady." And I know her name is Margaret. And he goes, "That's Margaret Mead." And she was a very famous, I think, anthropologist.
Oh.
In fact, they have a little section in the museum these days devoted to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very famous. I didn't know that. And it was a wonderful experience. The whole atmosphere was great. I loved that museum. And I haven't been back in years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then I was told to make money to go to Wall Street.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, okay, it sounded like the right thing to do. Everybody was saying, to make money, you gotta be on Wall Street. And I had no background in that at all. And I ended up in what they call the cage, where I was behind like bars, and I dealt with millions of dollars. Like if we needed $2 or $3 million, I had to send stock
Mm-hmm.
worth $3 million to
Yeah.
the bank
Mm-hmm.
in order to get credit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and to me it was all paper money. It didn't mean anything, and I used to sometimes sleep in the vault, you know, because on my lunch hour. And so that lasted for about a year, and the guy who was my boss, oh God, he just was the greatest boss you could have had. But he was getting overly friendly. He said to me, "Listen, I have a house in New Jersey. I would love for you to have the basement apartment, and the neighbor next door, they got a wonderful daughter. She'd make a great wife for you, and I thought, uh-oh, no,
No.
now we're getting too crazy.
Yeah.
So I thought a lot about it, and I said, no, I gotta quit.
Yeah.
And I quit, and he couldn't believe it. He said, I'll double your salary. Well, I was really good at wherever I went, I was good at what I did, because I would love it, even if that's not where I wanted to be, but I wasn't gonna fight it.
Yeah.
Like so many people hate their job, and they fight it, so anyway, so to backtrack, okay, on my third day at the museum, I went out on my lunch hour. It was a beautiful day. It was a fall day in October, and there's a wall along Central Park and the benches, and there were a lot of guys sitting there, and they're cruising. And I didn't know, and I remember I'm 18, so I'm fresh meat. You know, and they're all looking at me like, whoa, where did you come from? Yeah. I went out on my lunch hour, and all these guys are sitting around, and they were cruising. Well, I had never seen anything like that, and certainly not in Buffalo. And so as I was walking by, this one guy, young man, probably in his, I'd say, maybe mid to late 20s, probably late 20s, said, I know what you're thinking. And I said, what am I thinking? And he said, you're thinking my dog looks like Asta. Now, I love the old movies, and Asta is a dog in, I believe it's Nick and Nora Charles,
Okay.
Old movies, and I looked at the dog and I said, yeah, the dog does look like Asta, but I wasn't thinking that. And so he said, sit down. And you know, I'm a dumb kid, and he's older, so I thought, well, better, so I sat down, and he starts talking to me, and he says to me, I'm going to take you out to dinner tonight. I said, whoa, okay. And I told him where I live. He said, all right, I'll come get you, because I didn't know the city. I didn't know how to get. I knew to go from one subway straight to the get to the
point A to point B.
Yeah, point A to point B, exactly. I didn't dare venture out anywhere else, So then he came and got me, and we went down to 72 Bank Street in Greenwich Village. And there was Marion Tanner, and her nephew, whose name was Edward Tanner, went under the name of Patrick Dennis. In fact, he had several nom de plume names that he used for different books that he wrote. And he wrote one book, which was the real famous one, called Auntie Mame. So she was the basis for the book Auntie Mame.
Okay.
And the movie starred Rosalind Russell. First it was a Broadway production, a play, and then it was a musical, and went from a Broadway play to, I think, a movie, then a musical, and then a musical starring, of all people, Lucille Ball, and it was considered a complete disaster. And so anyway, she was the basis for the book, but the real Auntie Mame was him, the guy who wrote the book. Very flamboyant, very gay, and he was very, very popular, a writer at that time. All of New York loved him. But then that kind of writing went out of favor. It was like, things are fads. And so people weren't buying the books anymore. So he became a butler for a gentleman down in, I think it was Florida. And when the old man died, then he took the job working for people, I believe it was in Chicago, a couple who were heirs to, I don't know, I want to say Burger King or one of those, a lot of money. And he never told them that he was this famous writer. And I think he put out around 18 books.
Okay.
I mean, he was very popular at one time, and but he had no money. And then when he got cancer, he went home, and they found out who he was after he died. They read about it, and here this couple didn't know that they had this famous writer living
Yeah.
in their home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because he played the part of a butler. So anyway, Annie Mame, whose real name, as I said, was Marion Tanner, was oddly enough born in Buffalo. Everybody comes from Buffalo.
It all comes to Buffalo.
Yeah. All right. And you know, my mother started the Buffalo Wings.
Oh.
What happened was they had the restaurant, and I remember, I'll never forget the day it happened. We went to the butcher shop. I went with her, and she said to the butcher, "What do you do with the wings?" When you bought a chicken, they chop the wings off.
Yeah.
And you just get a chicken with the legs and the body, and that's it. And he said, "Oh, we throw them out." So she said, "Can I have them?" And he said, "Sure, I have some right now." So he just gave her this huge bunch. She took and she, I guess, deep fried them and put them on the counter with salt and pepper and gave them away for free.
Mm-hmm.
Just gave them away, you know? And then later, we heard that a bar probably caught on to it, and they did it too, but they made a sauce.
Yeah.
And that was called the Anchor Bar.
Oh, the Anchor Bar.
Yeah,
It's still there.
Yeah, and they're the ones. Was it the Anchor? Yes, the Anchor Bar.
Yeah.
And they were the ones who, luck had it, a reporter from the New York Times went in and he wrote the recipe down and how wonderful it was, and it was the birth of the Buffalo chicken wings.
Wow.
And that's how it got born.
Mm-hmm.
But we had done it first, but as I said, she was never thought of maybe a sauce to go with it, or charge, because it was all, you know, because you got it for nothing.
Yeah.
I'm sure after that, when it became famous, then that if you want to, you have to, probably the restaurant had to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Annie Mae, so I went to dinner at her house, and it was a scene out of a bad movie. It was a very beautiful townhouse that was rack and ruin, so to speak. Like the couch had cigarette burns in it, the dishes didn't match, there was a terrible odor, because women at that time, if you had a baby and you weren't married, and most of the babies were half white and half black, that was like such a disgrace then.
Yeah.
So they would dump them on Marion, and she used to name the little boys Patrick.
Okay.
And if you said Patrick, 3 or 4 little boys would come running over. And they had no discipline. Like if they had to pee, they would just take their penis out and pee on the wall. And I said, Marion, you can't, we gotta do something about this, you know? So, like for example, I noticed that there were sconces on the wall, and then when I had gone back a week later, the sconces were gone, and I said, what happened? And she said, oh, somebody probably needed money, and they took them, and see, she was like, she had her head and she'd have her feet on the ground, and her head was up there in the clouds somewhere, you know, and everything was wonderful, and everything, love your neighbor, and love everybody. And I said to her, how did this all start? And she said, well, I was married to a very rich man. It's not like the movie, by the way. And she said, I was married to this very rich man, and she called him the judge. Now, I don't know if he really was a judge. Maybe that was just her fantasy way of saying, you know, a pet name or something.
Yeah.
So she was out, and there was a little plot of land. You know, we don't have big gardens or one of homes in New York. So she had a little tiny plot of land, and she had roses, and she was cutting the roses. And a derelict said, ma'am, I'm very hungry. Could I have a sandwich? And she said, wait here. So she went in and she said to the judge, there's a man outside, he's hungry, can I feed him? And the judge said, sure, but put him in the kitchen, don't bring him up here. And that was fine. And a few days later, he came back with another person. And so she put the 2 of them in the kitchen and fed them. And then one day, the judge looked up from his newspaper, and there were like 6 of them sitting in the living room. So he turned to Marion, this is how she tells the story, and he goes, dear, he said, I'm going out to get a pack of cigarettes. Well, he never came back.
Oh.
And the truth was, she said, I should have been suspicious because he didn't smoke. So, but that's how Marion was.
Yeah.
And so she allowed people to stay there. Now, before my time, she allowed Billie Holiday, the singer, to stay there. And Billie Holiday was very heavy into drugs. And at night, the dope dealers, the drug dealers would be outside and they'd go, Billie, they'd be calling, Billie, and she'd be crying and she'd say, Marion, hold me, I don't want to go. And Marion said she would hold on to her and then she'd break away and run outside and wouldn't see her for days.
Oh.
Yeah, well, you know, it was that era, that time, people were, especially the blacks were so, you know, depressed. I mean, what kind of, that's another issue. But there was Grandpa Walton. He was there. Funny story about him, but I don't dare put it on. I don't want. Yeah, I'll keep it to myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe he wasn't such a sweet guy after all. You know. Anyway, then there was a lot of astrologers. There was a lot of mediums. There were a lot of gurus from India. So I was meeting all these people. Oh, and the guy that brought me there that famous night, he said, I gotta go, and left. And I, you know, he was originally probably wanted to take me home with him, but he probably thought, he's not my type and I'm too stupid or whatever. And so he just left and that was it. It's funny how it took him to get me to that door. And on the doorbell, by the way, she had a little piece of paper about so big, and it said, a home for wayward uncles and aunts. And she took the lock off the door, so anybody could stay there.
Okay.
And at first, what I heard from one actress who had been staying there told me it was really very nice. She allowed, you know, because people were more intelligent, they weren't the derelicts, and then the derelicts took over, and so the actors stopped going there. And so, but during the, once in a while they'd have like meetings there. They were very interested in theosophy, and let me shut this off. Oh, it's Daddy.
Of course it's my dad.
Alright.
We're busy!
Hello?
Yeah.
We're busy!
We're busy.
Oh, good morning. Sorry. Okay.
Talk to you later. Bye. So then, I started getting interested in all this, and she was giving me a breakfast one morning in the kitchen, and the place wasn't very clean. You know, it's a shame. She really let it run down. She was all by herself. She had no money. None of these people had any money. She would get a little money from the mothers who left the children there, but not a lot. I mean, $5, $10. I mean, what kind of money is that? You know, and it wasn't even enough to buy food. And then there were a group of girls from Vassar who were sending money to her, trying to help her, but that wasn't even enough. So in the morning, I was having breakfast with her, and the phone rang. Before the phone rang, I said to her, you know, one of the people that stays here, his name was Dick, something like Shoop or Soup, Shoop, I think. And I said, he's very dangerous, I said, something's not right, and he's going to get into a lot of trouble. You got to be careful, because he's bringing trouble to your door. The phone rang at that very moment, and it was someone from one of the people that would stay there. Said, Marion, they just arrested Dick. He's threatened to blow up the telephone company. And she looked at me, because he just got arrested at that very moment, and she said, Franco, a lot of people call me Franco. Franco, with big eyes you have, you realize you're a born-again gypsy. So she wanted me to get involved in all this, but the truth was, I didn't know about any of it. And if you said, what sign are you? I wouldn't even know what you were talking about. And it was very hush-hush in those days. It wasn't popular like it is now. And later, ask me later, how come it got popular, and I'll tell you. Partly my fault. Anyway, so what happened was, I thought, whoa, there's something here. So my original premise for going to New York was to study pantomime.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was I wanted to study with the great master Anton de Croo.
Mm-hmm.
And de Croo had a studio in the Times Square area. And as I was going up the stairs, he was coming down the stairs. And I looked, I said, Mr. de Croo, and he smiled and he nodded and he kept pointing up. So I went up there, and the rooms that he was, which would have been his office, was being all emptied out. And there was a woman there, and she only spoke French, she didn't speak English. And the guy who was the telephone installer was removing the phone, and he said, I speak French. I said, help me. And the guy says, what's going on? And she told him Mr. de Croo was going back to France. He didn't like New York. He wasn't very happy here. So I didn't, and I couldn't speak French, and I thought, God, to go to Paris and live, I mean, barely surviving in New York, how am I going to survive in Paris? So she then said there is another school, and it was called the American Mime Theater. Mm-hmm. And so I went to study with them. And I was there for several years. One of the students, his name was, I believe, Danny Richter. Father was a very famous cartoonist for the New York, I think it was, magazine. And Danny moved to California, and his great claim to fame was he was the ape in 2001 in A Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm. And when you see the ape with the bones banging on the floor and holding the bone up in the air, that's Danny.
Okay.
And those were fun days when I was at the Mime Theater. And a lot of things that happened at the Mime Theater were quite magical. The only thing I didn't like about the Mime Theater was everything was very 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. You know, there was no spontaneity. Mm. So we had all these exercises, and they had a line of boys and girls and a line of boys and girls, and I had to look opposite the young woman who was sitting opposite me. And she would say, I hear the clock ticking, I can hear Frank breathing, he has a hole in his t-shirt, and things that they saw. My turn, I said, I'm going to say Hillary. I'll say Hillary. I see you getting up, you go into Paul's office, oh my God, you're signing divorce papers. You're going to get a divorce. And she got up and ran out of the room crying. And Paul looked at me and he said, oh my God, I don't believe you said that. She did that earlier today. Oh. And so then I thought, wow, how did I do that? So then when we would take the class, one of the exercises, which was brilliant, which probably changed my life, he said, and there were 25 of us, and he said, I want you to be the sound of an instrument that I'm going to call out. And he said, I don't want you to pretend to be the drum, I want you to be the sound that the drum makes. And everybody was doing that, and he said, stop, stop, stop. And then he said, all right, I have another one. Let's be the sound of a flute. Well, that did it. And that opened a door into nirvana for me. And so I was there in the middle of the room, and everything, my body was vibrating. If I think about it, I can feel it even to this day. And it was like I was no longer in that room. I was somewhere completely in another planet. And when I stopped and I looked around, all the students were sitting on the floor in a circle watching me. He made them stop. And he said, another one, Franco, he said, that was beautiful. And he said, where did you go? And I said, I can't put it in words. I said, I can't. And he said, that was something, you know, because I had left the room. See, I was gone. And it was like a high euphoria, higher than any drug could ever give you, you know, on my own oxygen, so to speak. And so I knew then at that point that there was something going on in me that was different than everybody. And so I met a guy who became my first boyfriend, and he knew about tarot cards. So he introduced me to a woman that he had a reading, and the woman said he would meet someone and that was short and dark hair and actually like a clown, I think he said, and in her mind a pantomime was a clown. So he then said he thought it was me, see. So he said, you know, you would be very good, why don't you study this? So we went to a bookstore, I'll never forget it, Sam Weiser's bookstore, and it was like a football field when you went in there. Huge room, books everywhere. And I was told, walk in the center of the room and go down a few stairs, and there's all the occult books. Now, occult really means things that are hidden. Nothing's hidden anymore. It's all out there.
Okay.
So myself, him, Jay, and Norvin was a friend of his. We three of us went there, and I said to the man who was this huge sort of Santa Claus type gentleman, Jewish, said, I said, I want to study the tarot. Young man, what a journey you're about to go on. I swear, it was like, whoa, what am I getting into? He said, you're going to have the adventure of a lifetime. So he reached over and he took out a book, and he said, this is the book for you. And I said, oh, and he goes, let me tell you. He said, this book might take a month, might take a year, may take you a lifetime. He said, but you must stick with it. Now the first chapter of each book, he goes, each chapter of each, first page of each chapter was very difficult to understand, but don't let that bother you. He said, skip it. Just go in and start reading about the symbolism, and I know you can do it. So I said, okay, how much is the book? And he said, $3.
What was the name of the book?
The book was called The Tarot by Paul Foster Case. And to this day, I don't care what tarot book you read, nothing compares to that one.
Okay.
He really nails it. A lot of people don't get it. It's the way he goes into the conscious and the unconscious and the super unconscious. And I mean, I can explain it in layman's terms, which I will tell you later if you remind me how that works. But anyway, and he handled the book as though it was some holy relic from the Middle East, you know, and put it on the table. And so then I said, I need a deck of cards. And he said, oh, I can't help you. Oh. And he said, you have to pick the deck that talks to you. And in those days, there was the Marseille deck. There was the famous one, which is the one I don't use. It's
the Rider.
The Rider Waite deck.
Yeah.
And then the third one was a deck from Switzerland called the IJJ deck. That's the one I picked. And so he looked at me and he said, "That's a good one, but I suggest you should start with the tarot, the Marseille deck, because the pictures are closer to the pictures in the book, the major cards."
Yeah.
So I mean, a magician is a magician. These decks today, you buy it and it'll be a bear. There's a spirit animal deck.
Yeah. There's so many.
There's so thousands. But when there were only the 3 decks, and so I said okay. And so my friend Norvin, who's from Texas, he said, "I will buy that deck." It's the same one I use today. That's 60 years, that deck. It's so old. You can't even see the pictures anymore. And so I bought that. He bought that deck for me. And I never let that deck out of the house. But I learned on the Marseille deck where, you know, the king looks like a king. He doesn't look like some eagle flying over water. You know, today they use all these different symbols, which is okay. At first, I got very upset when I saw a deck. A deck came out in the New York Times of the major card. Somebody drew like the chariot guy on a motorcycle, and I thought, oh, that's terrible. But now that I look at it, no, it's these. They change so much that it's an artist's interpretation. So that's okay if that turns you on. You see. So I stuck with this, and then I had a teacher, and I called him back, and I said. It wasn't him that answered the phone. It was a woman that worked there. And I said, you know, I want to study this. Do you have anyone that could teach? And she said, Rala Nordic. And she was a lady from England, and she was called the Queen of the Tarot. And, you know, she used to sell her book, I think it was like $25 or $15. And today, if you want it online, it's like $100.
Oh,
I know. Well, times are different.
Yeah.
You know, and she's long gone. And anyway, so she really was the one who taught me how to read the cards. And I remember her saying to me, she looked at me and she said, you know, I noticed that nothing is new to you, that you are recalling. And she said, you've done this before. And then she talked about reincarnation. I never heard of that. And she said, you know, they always talk about, you know, Christ being resurrected. She said, maybe it was really reincarnated, you say. And so a whole worlds began to open up.
Yeah.
And then when I started studying this, and I began to read more about religion, I began reading between the lines. Wait a minute, this is what it really means, or this is what they're saying, but they cut something out. Yeah. It's like you have to be careful when I am interviewed, because they'll say, Frank Andrews said that the tarot is very dangerous, and then I would go on to say, because if you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't do it, but they would leave that part out. You see. They like I used to write for the New York Post, and a lot of times the last line was the punchline, the one that brought it all together. They cut it out.
Oh, no.
Well, the reason why they did, not all the time, but they would do it because there wasn't enough space. See, they just go by lines. That's how they think. And that's like dancing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, shuffle ball change. You know, come on, I can't do that. So anyway, I think the best article I ever got in the Post was my editor. I had about 4 different editors. I outlived them. And I wrote this huge article, and she went on vacation.
Okay.
And so while she was on vacation, it was Christmas time, and we got it in, and it talked about how, you know, they were going to come here to America. I talked about terrorism in New York City, and so on. And see, they would not usually publish that because they thought I'm scaring people, is what they said. So, but because she wasn't here, And the guy who ran the press didn't change a word. I thought, thank you. Yeah, I know. Even at the end, I started talking about, people from outer space coming. He left that in too.
Yes.
So everything was there. And then I got some flack for that, which I didn't care. And then when things happened, I started getting phone calls from television. They wanted me on TV. But before this, what happened was I got a call from the Museum of American Folk Art, and they said, we are going to do a show on the occult. And I said, oh, and we would like to meet with you. And I went over to see them. Lovely people. Oh my God, they couldn't have been I love museum people. They always were so sweet, And a friend of mine works on the Intrepid, the boat, the ship in the harbor. And I met them through her, and I got to say, oh, lovely, just so nice. So the Museum American Folk Art asked me, would I do a demonstration? And I said, all right, I have an idea. I said, since you're doing occult, I said, you're gonna want to jazz it up. So there was like an alcove, a small room, half the size of this. And I said, put a table there, a chair and a chair, and I said, and put a curtain. And I was on fire. The first guy came in, sat down, and I looked at him, and this is where ESP comes in. This is not in the cards. And I looked at him, and I looked at the cards, and I said, I see the Vatican behind you. And he went, what? I said, I see the Vatican. I said, you're a priest. And he goes, I am. And I said, and you're going to write a nasty, nasty book. And he screamed when I said, he said, I am. And I said, well, bye to the Vatican.
Yeah.
So, and that started it. So he ran out and he started telling people what I said. And he didn't have on a priest outfit.
Yeah.
So then later, this woman came, and she was so tough as nails. And she sat there, and I thought, you know what? I don't care if I ever see these people again. Let her have it. I said, you know what? You are one hell of a bitch. And I'm going to tell you, when you walk down the street, people cross to the other side of the street. And I said, but I like you. And I said, but I would never work for you. And she said, I like you. She was like that. She said, you're really good.
Oh.
Yeah, and she would melt it at that point. She said, I am a tough bitch. And I said, wow. And it turned out she was like either, I don't know, part owner or editor of the New York Times. You see, there's nothing worse than somebody who has power and money, and I've read for a few of them, and whoa, you don't want to work for them. In fact, one man looked at me one time and he said, you're right, I wouldn't work for me either. And he said, you're really good. He said, nobody would ever say that. He said, you got guts. So anyway, that night I was on, and there was about 30 or 40 people, one after another. I only gave them 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so it made the New York Times.
Oh.
Yeah. And so then I went on television. And this is what happened, and this, I'm sort of sorry in a way, but I guess I was the one to open the door. I went on TV, and there were two women, a black lady and a white lady. And I don't remember their names, so that's why I have to say black and white. So the white woman, I found out, didn't like this kind of thing. She was very anti.
Yeah.
So she says to me, if you're so smart, I don't understand, why aren't you rich? And I said, well, how do you know I'm not?
Ooh.
And she said, oh, well, that's true. I said, you haven't asked me how much money I have. So anyway, so she said, I have a question. I said, well, don't tell me the question. So I laid out the cards, and I looked at them, and I said, oh, you're thinking about quitting this job. You've been offered a job by a very short man, like he's like an accountant, could be Jewish or Italian, but you're not sure about taking it. It's not a lot of money, but it's prestige. And she looked at me and she said, I don't believe you just said that. She was like, it looked like I hit her in the face.
Yeah.
And she said, I can't believe that. And she had been offered a job by Mayor, well, at the time he wasn't the mayor, Mayor Beam, and I think he was deputy controller at that time, and wanting her to be like head of cultural affairs for New York, something like that. And so she was shaking. She like, how did you do? So I laid out the cards for the other lady, and I said, pick one, and she picked the Ten of Swords, which is the worst card of the deck. And I didn't tell her what it meant. So I put it back in the deck, and I'm shuffling. Now remember, there's 76 cards. So I lay the cards out, and the first lady said, if we do the cards again for me, would it come out the same? I said, probably very close to yes. If I keep you in the same vibration. And I looked at the black woman and I said, pick it again. And she did. She picked out the Ten of Swords.
Again? Oh my God.
And she held it up and she screams. And she said, how many Ten of Swords? I said, only one.
Yeah.
And so she said, nobody's going to believe it. Nobody's going to believe it. I said, I don't care. I don't care if you believe it. I don't care if the people watching this believe it. I said, I do. That's all that matters. And I said, so now, before we started all this, and I was in the dressing room with you and the other lady, I said, what did I tell you? And she said, I swear to God, he told me I picked this card. Well, it happened, I know people are going to really think I'm off my rocker. If you allow yourself to be at ease, okay, the whole world can open up, but most people can't. Well, I'm washing dishes on the second floor now at my house. Now, water and running water changes the ions in the air.
Okay.
So when I'm washing these dishes and I look over and there's this little man, a dwarf, okay, some kind of spirit or entity or ghost, and he speaks with this kind of Irish accent, and he goes, Frank, write down on a piece of paper the Ten of Swords and tell her when she picks it, open the envelope and it'll say, I said, no, that's like Houdini, that's like a magic trick. I said, people are going to think that's phony. And so the little guy is looking at me and he goes, tell her the Ten of Swords, and then disappeared. Now, I don't usually tell people that because they're going to think you're crazy, but I don't. It happened. Don't want to believe it. I don't. So when I got there, I was, no, I can't write it on a piece of paper. Then my first thought, what if it's not? I failed. Yeah, so shut up. Just tell her. And I did. And it worked out. Well, what happened was the moment that aired, and then New Yorker wrote about me, New York Magazine, all of a sudden, psychics are popping up all over the place. See, because it was like, it opened the door, and it's sort of sad in a way because they don't, I'm not saying they're good or bad, and I'm not saying, oh, Frank, you're the best. I'm not saying that. But the truth of the matter is, you really have to know what you're doing, and you have to understand the mind that you have. You see, and now I'm going to give you a very perfect example. For example, a lady came here, sat down, and I saw written right in front of me, Sardinia. Now, in those days, I didn't even know where the hell Sardinia was. And I said, I think you're going to go to Sardinia. And she looked at me and said, oh my God, I don't believe it. And she ran over to her purse and she whips out the ticket. And there it was, Sardinia. I know. And she said, I am going. And I said, wow. And now you can't even get the ticket like that. Imagine that, how things have changed. Huh? And so, and in those days, you could always change. If you don't want to go, someplace else or take another plane, you can't do that anymore. So that was here. I realized the conscious mind. She knows she's going to Sardinia. Okay. Now, another woman came umpteen years later, and there's a lot in between, but I'm going to cut to the chase. So this other woman comes, and she's very nervous. And I could see her body's trembling. Her thumbs are in like this. When people walk with their thumbs like this is a sign of fear.
Okay.
All right? And when you see people walking down the street in New York, they're usually tourists. Their thumbs are going to be in. They're scared.
Oh.
See, babies are born like that, and then later the thumb will come out, and when you die, the thumb's going to go back in because of the nerve. In fact, this undertaker who studied with me looked, and he saw one of the bodies like this with the thumbs in, and he goes, "Ha-ha! Andrews is wrong!" So he runs to the phone to call me on the wall, and he's dialing the number to say, "You were wrong, not all thumbs come out." And as he's talking, the thumb came out, and he screams over the phone. Yeah, and he was never afraid, and I became really good friends with him. His name was Tom, and a very sweet, sweet guy, died of cancer. So, anyway, so the conscious mind is here. Now another woman, as I said, came, sat down, and she's very nervous. I said to her, "Would you mind?" I said, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea. Would you like tea? Trying to get her to relax.
Yeah.
So she said, "Sure, that'd be fun." And so I walked over, I made tea and opened up a tea bag, and there's the leaves, and I said, "Let me read your teacup." And I'm really just having fun. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I thought, what the hell, you can't be that bad, right? So I'm looking at the teacup, and I said, "Oh, you're going to go to Greenland?" And she goes, "No." I said, "You're going to go to Greenland." She said, "Keep looking. Maybe you'll see the Eiffel Tower." And I said, No, I don't see Paris. I see Greenland." The cell phone rang, and she said, "Oh, you mind if I pick it up?" She said, "It's my boyfriend, and he never calls during the day." She lets out a scream, "Honey, I got an assignment in Greenland. You want to go?"
Oh.
Yeah. So now watch. This is the conscious mind. This was the unconscious mind. Okay? She didn't know she was going to go to Greenland. And then this is down here. Oh, he's going to propose to you. That's down in here. See? So those three areas, they say mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
And it's true. So this is the hardest thing. This part, and most psychics fail when it comes to that unknown part. And me too. I can't always get down in here. You try the best you can, but sometimes there's such a wall around people, you know, and a lot of times I throw a lot of people out. I ask them to go home because they're so stuck, you know, in the mire that they can't get out. I love Tennessee Williams. Tennessee Williams actually did write it in one of his plays, but the truth of the matter was Oscar Wilde who actually wrote it first in a play called Lady Windermere's Fan. And he says, "We're all standing in the mud or gutter. We're all standing in the mud, but some of us are looking up at the stars."
Okay.
And I love that quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, because most people, they have no imagination, or they come here and I'll say, "I'm not Harry Potter. I'm not. I can't change your life. You have to change it, not me. I might give you a clue, but unless you take the first step." And most people that I read for, point A, point B, point B, point A, boom, 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 boom. I said, how about going to C?
Yeah.
And then maybe your life will change, and the things I'm predicting could possibly happen. So, yeah, but this takes a lot of time to figure all that out. I mean, I have therapists who send me people, which is very nice. They say, "What do you want for Christmas?" And they say, "I want to go to Frank." So they sent them to me, which is great, rather than buying them a gift. And you know, it's 60 years of meeting people, you know, that came through that door. Now it's really over in some ways. But what's interesting is that since I'm not seeing people, I'm seeing more dead people, which is something I never really got into. Once in a while, yes. But now it's happening more and more. In fact, the other day, friend comes over and he says to me, "Did anybody new come to the house this week?" I said, "What, dead or alive?" And he screamed, "I'm thinking alive." Yeah, I didn't know what he meant.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. Because this kind of energy has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of actors become painters at the end of life, and pretty good painters too. I've seen some. I think Tony Curtis became a painter. I know. What was his name? Anthony Quinn was doing painting, and a lot of them do painting. See, because it's creative that they have to let it out.
Yeah.
You see, like the other day, I had a friend over, and I looked out at the window, and I said, "Oh God, I don't really see." I let it go as fast as I say it. I forget. I'll say Juan, I know, or Jose.
Yeah.
It was a Spanish name. And I said, "Did your father had a company? Did anybody?" But they're all Asian. I said, "I know this is odd, but do you have anybody that worked for your father that with the name Jose?" And she goes, "No, I would know." And I said, "I hear that name. This man is not dead, but he's alive. But he's not. But it's. I don't know. He's walking between worlds." And the phone rang, and she answered it and let out a yell. A friend of hers said that a tree branch fell down and hit this guy in the head that she knew, and he's in a coma, and that was the name.
Okay.
See, see, now that's telepathy. You see, telepathy is like we're sending out a wave, and I know out there who's listening to this, don't tell me you haven't thought of a friend you hadn't heard from in years, and then the phone rang and it's that friend.
Yeah.
You see, that happens to a lot of people. That's really telepathy. You're on a wavelength that you pick it up. You see, and if you listen to it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and more things happen. A lot of people are scared. They think, "Oh my God," or it's. People will say, "Oh." Especially religious people, "You're doing the work of the devil." And I say, "God, I wish I could." You know, if I did, there's a few people I'd zap.
Yeah.
You know, but unfortunately, no, can't do that. You know, I'm not Harry Potter. So, you know, it's, but it's really an amazing world, but it takes a long time to really develop. I'll tell you one time, I'll never forget this. This kid came to the house, very handsome boy, probably 17. His mother brought him. So they saw me on television. I don't go on often because I get so many calls I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
When New York Magazine said I was the best psychic in New York, we counted 5,000 phone calls. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Yeah, I didn't answer any of them. I didn't. And I think I went on vacation. Anyway, so this young man came to the house. This is years and years ago. And I'm doing the reading, and he said, "I read cards too." I said, "Really?" And he whips out a tarot deck that he made for himself.
Oh.
And the first thing he did was he made the shape with the cards of a Christmas tree. And he said, "I get the name Jay. I get the name Norman. No, it was Norman, but he said Norman." And he said, "Then you're going to go away on a weekend trip. Looks like to Connecticut. There's a lady there. She's an Aries." And all was true.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, and here's this kid. Then he started talking about my future and so on. I was really, I mean, the hair, like I'm telling you, hair is standing up on my arms now. I still remember like yesterday. And I looked at his hands, and I looked at him, and I said, "Can I talk to your mother for a minute?" And he said, "Sure." So she came in, and he sat in the back. I closed the doors, and I said, "He's amazing." She said, "I know, he scares people." I said, "I know." I said, I couldn't even, I was stunned. I can't read as good as this kid. And so I said, "But I worry about his lungs." And she said, "Yeah, I know." She said, "He has a problem." And I said, "Well, you really gotta spend nights with him." And she said, I know. She said, "Don't talk about it." And I said, "Okay, but I'm warning you, there's a problem, and we're aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So about a couple months later, she called me. He died.
No.
Yeah, his lungs filled up with fluid
Oh.
and literally drowned. And see, now today they could have a dog would sense something and bark, and the father or mother would come running in. Before, I think the father slept in like next to him, or the mother would sleep next to him, or they had a cot. I don't know what the arrangement was, but somebody had to be in the room in case that happened. But I guess nobody. They could have been sleeping and didn't hear.
Yeah.
Anyway, he died. And she said, but I want to tell you, he was so happy, so thrilled in meeting you. You made him happy. So I cried. And I thought to myself, wow, to have that at such an early age, and then maybe that's all it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know, and because very few people will achieve that. You know. What other questions you want to ask me? You ask me.
I just wanted to ask about Andy Warhol.
Well, Andy Warhol, you could film upstairs if you want the portrait.
Yeah.
Andy was quite a character. What happened was I had a friend named Bernard who worked for him and worked for Rupert Smith. Rupert Smith was a very well-known printmaker. So, like, you can have an idea, but somebody's got to make it.
Yeah.
So, Andy and Rupert worked together on the silk screening, okay? And they had Bernard work with them also. So, Bernard told Andy all about me.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to meet me, and he wanted to take me to the theater. And I said, what play did he want to see? And I said, oh, that's my client produced it. I said, I'll get us tickets. And I think he was shocked because he always bought the tickets. So we had free tickets to this play, which I didn't really like, and I had already seen it. And so we went to the play, and I even left early as I can't sit through this. So the second act, I said, I'll see you guys later. So I went to a restaurant next door, and they came out of the theater. We all sat together, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked. And he could see that I liked him, but I wasn't into him. Andy Warhol, no.
Yeah.
No, you know, I had my own entourage.
Yeah.
You know, he had what I call camp followers. He made a lot of untalented people famous.
Okay.
But they had no talent.
Oh,
but
okay.
now all of a sudden, superstar. You know. So anyway, so then about a week or two later, I get a call from Bernard, and he said, Andy wants to take you out to dinner. I said, okay. So we would go out to dinner a lot, and he was fascinated by me. So he wanted to do my portrait, but I didn't have the $50,000 for a portrait. And so, but I had something he wanted, and that was, it was this big, and it was called Bag One. It was white patent leather with a handle, and in there were about, I'm going to say 10 big lithographs by John Lennon.
Oh, okay.
And most of them were pictures of Yoko and John having sex.
Oh.
And even if, and they were very tastefully done.
Okay.
And I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll let the world on a little secret. Yoko told me, or John told me, that he was very high. If you see the first one, normally A is for apple, B is for boy, A is for elephant, B is for the house you live in. And you know, he was all over the place, yeah. But what he did was he copied some of the drawings in Playboy magazine of the naked girls, but he just traced and then did his lithographs and put Yoko in its place. But some of them are really good. And in fact, once in a while they go on sale. Some are $2,000, $3,000, $10,000, depends on which one you want. The more popular ones go for more money. Well, anyway, I had the whole set, which was really lovely, and it said happy birthday, and Yoko signed it, and John signed every one of the lithographs. So he wanted that, Andy wanted that. So I gave him that for the portrait.
Oh, okay.
And that's how the portrait came about. And he said to me, what colors do you want? I said, I like blue first and then green. So that's why there's a lot of blue.
Yeah.
Now a couple of people came here and they said, oh, you got the blue one. And I said, oh, and they said, there's a yellow one. Now I've not seen it and there's no record of it.
Oh, okay.
Either someone stole it, you see, because it was really toward the end of his life.
Yeah.
Because he died shortly thereafter. So it could have been the last portrait that he did. Now they did tell me he was working on a full-length portrait of a woman, but it was never finished. So, and it was quite a to-do. He was very excited about doing it for me, and Mrs. Miller, who husband Robert Miller, they owned all the duty-free shops in the world, and she was good friends with Andy, and she came down with the portrait, and Andy, they brought it here, and we went to not Mrs. Miller, Chantel, her name was. She didn't come with us. I think she went back uptown. So Andy, myself, and all of a sudden a group of people, he met them, told them to come to the Odeon. He was very funny. He only would pay them $50 a whole day's work. But he would pay for the dinner.
Okay.
So he paid, there were 10 of us. And what happened was, before going out to dinner, I reached in an old tarot deck that people would drop tarot decks in my mailbox.
Oh, okay.
That's why I have stacks and stacks of cards, especially the ones, funny that they knew the kind of deck I liked. So I got a just endless stack of cards. Anyway, and I pulled one out, and Bernard said, oh my God, why are you giving him that one? I said, well, it's the one I pulled out. So we went and we talked, and finally we were ready to leave, and I said, here, I have this for you. And I wrote on there, to Andy, love Frank Andrews, and I slid it across the table, and he picked it up, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, and then he looked again, and then he put it in his pocket, and it was the death card. And that was the last time I saw him.
Yeah.
And see, that's what he didn't want to hear. He never came here for a reading. He was too scared, because he was afraid I was going to tell him, you're not going to live much longer. And that's funny, but that was the one card. See, when I say, oh, pull a card, I'll just read what that one says. And yeah, and that was the last time I saw him. But we used to go to the Odeon, and we used to go to Mr. Chow's.
Mr. Chow's.
Uptown, yeah. I'm trying to think. That's it. Just those two restaurants. It might have been a third. Well, there was one near the theater district, but that's only because I left the theater early. I said I'll be next door. And I just couldn't sit through the play anymore. No. Anyway, so, and that's it. But he's gone now, and Bernard's gone. A lot of my friends are all dead. They all died. You know.
You have lived one crazy life, Frank.
Oh, there's a lot more.
I know.
I'm not living one crazy life anymore, though. It's now I'm at a point I'm just talking to the dead, and to myself, not to anybody else. Just something I'm.
They're probably more entertaining than people.
Oh, most definite. And it's the funniest thing because there are three of them, and they call themselves bros. I said, I'm not a bro. They keep calling me bro, and I said, I'm not a bro. And they say, sure, you are a bro. And so they know I love stories. So one of them was telling me this amazing story, and after about days and days, and it went on and this and that, and like a fantasy, and I said, are you lying? And he said, yeah. He said, but I know you would like something like that. I said, you son of a bitch. And and they get mad at me because I spent too much time on my iPad.
Oh.
Before. So now lately I've said, all right, I promise I'm not going to put it on because they want to talk.
Okay.
And we talk, and we talk every night.
Do they tell you anything about what's on the other side?
We talk about that. They said there's no heaven.
Okay.
And there's no hell.
Okay.
But it's what you bring to it. In other words, like people who are so angry, and believe me, I know them.
Yeah.
And when they die, if they're going to be angry, they're going to bring it to. Now you could let it go, but that seems to be the hardest thing for people to let go. Like I've had people steal things, people lied to me, sold so much money that I helped them with, and you know the story. Took out even a loan on the house so that I could help them from going under, and she never paid me back, yet making millions of dollars or thousands of dollars. So, but you know what? I'm not going to get cancer because of that. You have to let go. What's done is done. And that was, I gave it from my heart, and she saw it as a con game.
Yeah.
That's what she did. And I was either ignorant, I should have seen it, but maybe I had to go through that.
Yeah.
Maybe I had to go through it, but it's over, you see. Yeah, letting go. Well, if you're going to hold on to anger, you're never going to be free.
Yeah.
You're still stuck with that person.
Yes.
That's the same thing I tell when people break up. I said, if you're walking down the street and you walk into him and you see him and your heart's pounding, you're still in love with him. You still got a problem.
Yeah.
You know, love and hate are so close together.
Two sides of the same coin.
Right, right. And you have to, but if you become indifferent, you know, if he says to you, oh, I'm getting married, and you say, wow, oh, I'm so happy for you, you've gotten out of it.
Yeah.
You see, you got away. But most people don't. You see, they still hold on to that horrible feeling inside.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think everybody has a story, and it's interesting how people see it their way, and they're not up. You see, the three things we deal with. First thing is sex. Okay, what do you want? You want a man, you want a woman, you want a younger man, an older man. You have to make up your mind. That's number one. And that's why it's a revolution now. How people are changing.
Yeah.
You're transsexual, there's this, there's that, there's fluid, you know, there's terms I've never even heard of.
Yeah.
So what do you want? And that's, forget what advertising tells you. Forget what your mother told you, what religion tells you. What do you really want? Okay, how many gay guys I know married because they'd lose their job if they didn't have a wife and kids. All right, so that's number one. What do you want sexually? Number two, you have 24 hours. What do you want to do to earn a living? You have to have money because money is freedom. If you can buy yachts and cars, and after a while you even get bored with that. Somebody gave me a Cartier watch. I gave it away.
Yeah.
I don't even wear a watch. And so, yeah, all those things are nice, but they don't mean much really in the end. So you need to make money to survive. The old days, okay, I go out and shoot a deer with a bow and arrow, bring it home, and you're going to cook it and clean it. Well, I'm going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that's second thing. And the third thing, which is the hardest for everybody, it seems, how to be objective and not subjective. Religious people are usually very subjective.
Okay.
My God is better than your God.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to put you on a cross. I'm going to cut your head off because you don't believe the way I do. Is that what it's all about? You know? I mean, Northern Ireland hates Southern Ireland, you know?
Yeah.
So this constant fighting, it's going on right now.
Yes.
You gave me watch the news. So you have to be really objective and not subjective. For example, if somebody didn't show up and they call me and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I fell asleep. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get crazy. Second time, they do it a second time, same thing. Third time, I'm going to say, you know, 3 times you didn't show up. How about not calling me anymore?
Yes.
Because there's obviously something wrong. The one lady, it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of life and death. I said, okay, can you come tomorrow? I'll take, I'm busy tomorrow, but I will make time for you. I'll take the person that I was going to see out. So you have noon. Can you get here by noon? Yes, I can. I said, where do you live? I live in Queens. I said, you must leave early.
Yeah.
So I mapped it out. How to get here, the fastest way to get here. About 10 minutes to 12, she calls.
Oh,
And I said to her, it's 10 minutes to 12. Oh, I'm getting on the subway now. I said, look, I don't have time. You're not going to get here till maybe closer to 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't do this. Yeah. So she said, but it's a matter of life and death. I said, well, that's your choice.
Yeah.
I'm too busy.
Yeah.
And I hung up.
If it's life and death, you should have made the time to come earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And, but yeah. So, I mean, people, everybody sees it their way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I didn't get angry. But, come on. I gave you the chance. Somebody else, I gave three chances and they didn't show up on the third one. And I said, well, can I come tomorrow? No, my life is moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
This is my Grandpa Frank.
All
We
right.
love him. He's the greatest man to ever live.
What's that?
You're the greatest man to ever live.
No. Anyway, yeah, today's the day after Christmas. Wow.
Time flies, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.